You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and man, today we have another show lined for y'all. We have a true honor to have our special guest, Dr. Albert Bramante. He is a veteran talent agent. You can go right to his website, albertbramante.com. And man, like I said, it's all about our guest, the powerhouse, the superstar today, over 20 years of experience with top tier talent. He's been able to help actors land some of the biggest roles in the industry. But what's truly setting him apart is his next level insight to what happens behind the scenes, not just in Hollywood, but in the human mind. He's armed with a Ph.D. in psychology, along with certifications in hypnosis and NLP. Dr. Bramante is a master at helping performers conquer the hidden enemies of success, self-doubt, when it comes to fear and overcoming that fear. This is an episode I know you're going to enjoy. So first and foremost, I just want to cut to the chase and say to our guest, man, Dr. Albert Bramante, how you doing, man?
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I know you do a lot of great work, so I'm glad to have you on. You're wearing multiple hats. Let's just start from there. Kind of explain to the audience what are some of the things that you began to realize from some of the things that actors, struggle with, because the battle of the mind is something that none of us can escape.
100% true. And I started as an agent 21 years ago, and I started working with actors. And then my experience, what kind of got me really focused on, working with mindset, was noticing in the beginning how many actors were self-sabotaging in the beginning, that were, their words were telling me one thing, they wanted to work, they wanted to audition, yet on the other hand, their actions were telling another story. They were self-sabotaging, they were, and what I mean by that, to make it clear, would be, turning down auditions, not going on auditions, being late, being unprepared, sometimes, just no showing, confirming an audition and then not going. And even a lot of circles, performing arts circles, we would sometimes talk and we would say how actors are their own worst enemy sometimes. And it's already a very tough industry to begin with. And, to work in show business and the entertainment world, as exciting as it is, it's also, the harsh reality is a lot of competition, especially in my area, which I'm based in New York. So if you work in a capital like New York, LA, or Atlanta, there's a lot of actors. There's hundreds of thousands of actors across the country, and only a small number of roles. So the competition is very limited to begin with.
People, they don't understand the work that goes on behind the scenes, because to your point, the little things make up the bigger picture, the bigger opportunities, if you will. It's like a snowball effect. When you think about understanding the subconscious mind, how that changes the way an actor approaches their craft, what are some of the things that you notice as far as like before and after, working with you, and how that looks for them?
Well, just before and after, I mean, even it's just all about stepping into your power as an artist and really just embracing your true and full potential. And what that looks like, that would mean, keeping yourself in classes, keeping yourself in training, and staying, abreast of all of that. And when you are on top of your game as a performer, at least mentally, you're going to be much more effective in delivering whatever it is you intend to deliver. And that's in any profession, not just for actors. So a lot of times, just as an actor, embracing power, embracing your type, and just really going with it, being very specific in how you market yourself and how you brand yourself and branding. And that, again, is not a principle just exclusive for actors. It's for anybody. When you're more, pinpointing your marketing, it's much more effective.
When you think about how the people you've been able to work with and just observe for all these years, what does the process look like when they began to reframe those thoughts? Because you mentioned imposter syndrome. What does it look like when they start to reframe how they think in those high pressure moments?
Well, the thing about imposter syndrome is it's so normal, in the sense that we all have it, to some degree, on some level. And I like to demystify it in the fact that it's not a thing of failure. It's not something that's going to look negatively about it. It's about being a human being too. So the one thing I often say, especially with actors, is the language that we use, the communication that we use, both outwardly and inwardly, is extremely important. So what I try to work with actors is get out of the mindset of, or the romanticized mindset of the starving artist and the struggling artist or the aspiring artist. When you should always be referring to yourself as a professional working actor. And when you do that, it starts to mean something to you internally.
Yeah.
You're changing that internal script.
Once again, watching us on Refocused Radio and listening to us on anywhere you find podcasts or radio, talking to our guest, Dr. Albert Bramante. Go to his website, albertbramante.com. He's a veteran talent agent. This, I feel, is going to be some great, if you can say, secret sauce for those who are tuning in, because when you break down with your clients how fear of success can be just as dangerous as the fear of failure, what are some signs behind that? Because there's a lot of stuff you can Google and type online, but what's the real thing that you've been able to discover some of the pain points there?
Well, the reason I think fear of success is just, if not even more, insidious and treacherous than fear of failure, because it's not a conscious fear. It's not, nobody walks around saying, I fear success. We all want success, at least on a conscious level. We all want that. However, on a subconscious level, success can be very, very scary. And because of it means change, fear of change, more responsibility, and more, change in your identity sometimes. And that can be scary. And that can be terrifying. And as human beings, we're kind of addicted and wired to stay comfortable, which is, in the long run, can be a dangerous game to play, is to stay comfortable.
I was going to say, speaking of staying comfortable, sometimes when you see the signs of discomfort, just from personal experience, a lot of times it's like a calling for you to expand. So when a person you're working with, when they finally reach that aha moment where, okay, all this doubting myself and making it harder than what it truly is, what does that look like when they get to that breakthrough moment where it's like, okay, like it's not as deep as I thought it would be. Like I just had to kind of just make a decision, make it happen.
Well, yeah, it's not, once you realize that it's not as scary as you thought it was going to be, because our minds are very good at deceiving us and making future events seem a lot scarier than what they are. And part of what I recommend is stepping outside your comfort zone, doing something a little bit differently each day. Maybe not doing anything drastic right away, but stretching it a bit. And whether it's, going on tape or putting yourself on video or going and giving a public talk somewhere, the more that you do that, the more that you see that yourself succeeding in that, it's going to be a powerful self-esteem boost and self-image boost that's going to help you in the long run just become more confident.
And we hear people talk about Just focus on getting 1% better every day. A lot of times we just want to eat the whole pie. Like, let me win right now in the next 4 hours. And that's just not reality. Like, that's not reality for anybody. So when you look at the long game, you being certified in both hypnosis and NLP, based on that experience, can you kind of explain to our audience how those tools help rewire self-limiting beliefs?
Well, it's all about there's a concept known in both kind of areas called reframing. So reframing reframing the idea of failure as only feedback. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So when you start to adopt that, mindset of like, well, even if I fall on my face, I'm going to be still successful at the end of the day. And I use the metaphor of the example of a toddler. If anybody's listening who's ever been around infants and toddlers, look at how they learn to walk. They will fall down hundreds of times, but they get back up. I've never met a person who gave up on trying to walk.
Yeah.
But yet we give up after a couple of times of maybe not succeeding in a sense. So I think we can learn from our fellow infants and toddlers is to get back up again. And that's something that we can help with limiting, changing limiting beliefs, is transforming failures as stepping stones to success. Because each time things may not go as you please or want, it's still valuable feedback and information that in the long run can be valuable to you and can really help you grow.
I love that visual with the toddler because it's true. If you understand that, if you're just kind of paying attention next time, if you're around one, I'm an uncle, so I've had my fair share of seeing the falls. What's so interesting about that point is that they do get up. And a lot of times it's instant. It's not like, they fall and they're like, oh, let me just go ahead and take a nap here. I mean, I feel like all jokes aside, that's kind of how we are sometimes with our careers. We're so scared of making a mistake, or we're so scared of the unknown that we haven't even reached that point on that timeline, on that mile marker, if you will. That is something that comes with growth, comes with self-awareness. Let's talk about that a little bit when it comes to being self-aware of our insecurities versus our instincts. What are some of the things you've been able to study to notice that, wow, okay, if I just kind of shift how I approach things, it might get better for myself?
Yeah, it's just shifting the factors, and how you look at, adversity or setbacks, and like, okay, they're learning experiences. And very often our fears are much more severe than reality. Often, and another prompt that I would even ask your listeners is keep a journal today of what you're fearful about, and then open it up in a year from now. And a lot of times you'll see that you'll be almost laughing at that, like, that was really, I was afraid of that. That was nothing. And and what fear really is all about is false evidence appearing real. Yeah, and it's false most of the time, our fears. And even if there's something, that you may be lacking, there's also that chance of, okay, well, I'm going to learn that. Let me learn something, what I need to do. And another thing is just to adopt the mindset of always learning. No matter what level of education you attain, you're always learning. Like, I really consider my Ph.D. is really the beginning process, even though it's considered a terminal degree. Maybe in the formal education sense, yes, but in my learning, it's just the beginning. So always be learning, reading, listening to podcasts. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Everything you said just now, I just want to double down on that point because learning is something that is forever, and I feel like that's what separates those who are average and those who are like great, like top 10% in their industry or background, professional career, because it's not just how you feel. It's also about how you execute. And what do you do after you did something? Like you said earlier, for our listeners and viewers, to keep a journal, to kind of document, what's going on. Because sometimes if you are not recording what you're doing, like for instance, this show, if I showed you a tape from last year in September when I first started YouTube, oof, man, I'll probably be laughing and crying myself. But it's that learning as we keep pursuing, because kind of touch on that active role that we have to be responsible.
Yes.
No one's going to rescue you and force you to level up.
No, and you just level up through learning and by doing it. And, as an actor, just keep auditioning, keep going. Every opportunity you can get, you should be auditioning. Every opportunity you get to perform, you should be performing. And as you said, even for podcasters, I often say, look at episode 1 then versus episode 1000. And there'll be a big difference because you've grown, you've learned, you've adapted. Even if you look at like the greats like Joe Rogan, for instance, if you look at a lot of his earlier podcasts, it's extremely different than now. And we weren't, even when we first watched Joe Rogan, years ago, we weren't judging him. It was, it was what we know at the time. But if you look at the difference, there's a huge difference. And that's because we're evolving over time. We're always a work in progress. So just do it. That's the best way to do it. That's the only way you're going to get better at any skill, is just do it. And, most of the community here in any profession is going to be extremely supportive. So, you'll get feedback. You'll have some setbacks, but you're going to learn in the process. And that will help you get better. And it's better to do something and make mistakes than to do nothing at all. Because, and I'll say this, most psychologists have, stated that the biggest source of regret in life is not the mistakes we made. It's the opportunities that we didn't get to achieve. It's like, I could have did it, but I didn't because of fear.
Yeah. It's something that I think about a lot. When you think about, from a visual standpoint, the powder and the clay, the clay doesn't look nothing like it used to. And sometimes, like, if you believe in higher power, whatever floats your boat, is your decision. But me personally, on the faith mode, it feels like we understand the resources that are out there. There are things you cannot control, but you can control how you respond in every situation. And I feel like as you get older and you get more mature, you will start to see the breakthroughs and see the more opportunities and see the bigger platforms and see the bigger successes as you understand that I had to make those decisions. I have to choose that I want to be better. And then I have to actually choose what will it take for me to take that first step. And then that first step turns to the second, and this momentum starts going forward.
Yes, and it's all about taking that first step and just keep going. And you cannot control other people. And that's the one thing that sets us apart. Even coming from a hypnotist and NLP perspective, there's nothing more stronger than free will. So we can't change someone's free will. But what we can do is work on how we respond to something. So, but that's one thing I would suggest to do, in a sense. So,
once again, let's not Refocused Radio, and you can watch us every week, man. IamRefocusRadio.com. Go to our YouTube channel, Refocus Network. Talking to our guest today, Dr. Albert Bramante. Go to his website, albertbramante.com. Veteran talent agent. I'm telling you, if you know anybody who's in acting, or if you're in it yourself, you want to keep this episode and listen to all the other shows that he's on, because he's kind of out there, man. He's on other shows talking this great masterclass talk right now. My next question, before we wrap up officially, last 6 minutes, is what advice will you give to someone watching this right now who feels like, man, I've been at this for some years now. I just kind of feel like I'm being overlooked no matter how much reps I'm putting in, so to speak. What would you say to them to kind of push them further?
I would say to keep going. That would be the main thing. And if you keep feeling that you're overlooked and been doing this for years, maybe it's time to change your approach and how to look at things. So, like for actors, for example, actors on marketing materials, which is like headshots, demo reels. Maybe it's time to get new headshots. Maybe it's time to change up your demos. So change things up a bit. That's what I would suggest.
When you think about discipline, we touched on self-sabotage right earlier in the conversation. But from your background professionally, what is the biggest difference between discipline and self-sabotage when it comes to pushing forward and making that momentum that we kind of touched on?
Well, I would say, discipline is by keep putting yourself out there and just by being focused and taking the things that you can change and work on improving them. So that might mean getting into some more classes, some more training, refreshing, take some courses as refreshers or some classes as refreshers, rather than saying, I have all the training I need. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier, is if you adopt the mindset that you know everything, you're already self-sabotaging because you don't. And even if veteran actors, the A-list actors, are always working in class or with coaches. So keep yourself being disciplined and focused. And again, if something is not working out, it may be time to not give up, but change course a bit. Try something different. Hire a coach and maybe they can work through that and showcase, okay, this may be what's holding you back. Maybe this is what you should try differently.
The actor's mindset is one thing. How they move is another thing. When you think about some of the great names and some of the people that you help land some of the most amazing roles, right? What do you believe helps them to have sustainable success in their career versus someone who starts and they fall apart?
I think showing up consistently is the key. Being consistent, showing up and giving it their all, no matter how many times they've done it. That's the main success rate, is just by staying focused and staying consistent. Consistency is a key, and that's with any profession. We have to remain consistent in what we do.
I heard someone tell me earlier this year, some of the greatest performance is due to the amazing preparation. With you, what we would say allow someone to nail it, if you will, when they're at auditions or when they're in front of the camera?
Well, preparation is the key. And not just the mechanics of preparation for a role, but even mentally, too. A very powerful tool that can be used is visualization, like imagination or visualizing. So even before the audition or before the interview or whatever you're going for, always, imagine or visualize this being success already. And using sometimes even like a brief hypnotic script or metaphor is close your eyes, imagine yourself in a movie theater, watching yourself on screen and watching yourself on screen doing these tasks and being success at it, and run through that several times, not just one time, several times, because the brain does not know the distinction between reality and fiction.
The last thought I have is the word connection, because when you really connect to something, like when a singer connects to a song, it's like it unlocks what the audience feels from that performance. What has been your experience on that last thought when it comes to developing that connection a actor has with a assignment?
That's really important, because that's what actors do when they connect to a role or connect to a character, is by really fully connecting and embodying that character. not just performing a character, but embodying that character. So there's a school of acting that's very popular called method acting, in which you will actually fully adopt the character, which, that has to be done within boundaries, of course, but I think the important thing is just truly connecting to the material and connecting to the character and really being that character, because it shouldn't seem like you're acting or being phony. You're truly embodying that character. If you look at every Emmy Award nominee or winner, or Oscar nominee or winner, very often the performances are so real, but they don't even know that they're acting. Because that's really what they're doing. They're just reading a script that somebody else wrote. But they do it in such a way that connects us and brings us in.
Once again, you've been watching I Am Refocused Radio right here online, or listening to us on radio podcast. Been talking to our guest, Dr. Albert Bramante. Go to his website, albertbramante.com. Like always, want to say to you, sir, thank you for your time with us today.
Thank you again. Thank you for inviting me. We're really happy to be here.